Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Triangle of Friends. I'm Monish. As always, I'm joined by Nishant. Hey Nishant, what's up? What a fun weekend in the NBA this weekend. We had the Lakers beat the Nets, which I can see on your face that you're visibly excited about that. And then the Clippers beat the Suns, which we spoke about briefly on the Friday episode, but on the Monday episode actually. But I want to look at. I was looking at the Western Conference standings, and I'm thinking of the playoff matchups, and I'm drooling at the prospect of seeing the
Yeah,
Mavs take on the Clippers or the Suns take on the Clippers. Right, even in the first round, that's a possibility. And let's do a episode about that, the seedings, and the potential playoff matchups.
let's do it.
Right. Yeah. So this is how the table currently looks like. Utah Jazz are on top. Phoenix Suns follow them closely. The Clippers and the Nuggets are fighting it out for the third spot. And I'll tell you why the
The
third spot is
champs.
important. The third
Okay,
spot is important because you can avoid the Lakers in the first round because the Lakers are fifth. And you get an easier matchup potentially because the Portland Trailblazers are on sixth and you'll end up playing them. The second place team Phoenix Suns have a nightmare matchup because that you'll probably end up facing Luka and the Mavs. And the eighth seed, whoever that's going to be, either the Grizzlies, Spurs, Warriors, Pelicans, even that'll be the easier matchup for Utah Jazz, so they get the reward in facing slightly weaker opposition than the rest. Now, let's leave out that. I think Utah will easily qualify, whoever that'll be. The second place versus the seventh place. That's going to be a fun matchup, isn't
that's the
it?
matchup.
Phoenix
Yeah,
Suns versus Dallas Mavericks in the first round of the playoffs. How do you see that happening? I wouldn't say Phoenix start off as the favorites because you're up against KP and Luca, and I think that's a the Mavs have been having a incredible run of late. I think they won 19 of the last 26 games and 21 of the last 23 where Luca has played. So I don't think that's going to be an easy matchup for the Phoenix Suns. What do you think?
I'm not betting against Luka Doncic unless there's a Kawhi or a LeBron at the other end. I'm just not. Like Chris Paul's great, Devin Booker's awesome, but I'm not betting against Doncic. That dude's a problem in the playoffs. I mean, even without Porzingis last season, he almost took the Clippers to the cleaners.
Yep.
It took all of their defensive might and their squad depth and their strip club visits and Paul George and Kawhi Leonard and Montrezl Harrell, Pat Bev, all of their combined might and some pretty dirty play, might I add, from uh, Marcus Morris. Is he the Morris twin in the Clippers? Yeah,
Yes.
Marcus Morris. It's like Bogdanovich and the Morris twins are a death trap in the NBA. Yeah, so Marcus Morris, it's kind of why he's there in the first place. But anyway, Doncic took that team to the cleaners almost without Porzingis. Um, I wouldn't fancy any of these teams against him. They're like the Miami Heat of the West. They're a nightmare matchup in the playoffs. They can hurt you multiple ways, inside and out. Um, only the only chink in their armor would perhaps be if Porzingis doesn't show up on defense. That's their only problem. But otherwise, I
I
think
thought
they're
you were going to stop the sentence with Porzingis doesn't show up because of injuries.
that's their reality. Assuming that that he is fit, because I say that because look, Porzingis being out, that's just life. that's normal. But if he's fit, what is surprising to see this season was he was a shell of himself, even from last season
Yeah.
defensively. Offensively, he's still shooting it from everywhere, and I mean, he's 7'3", he can put the ball on the floor and he can shoot from just about anywhere. So you can't stop him on the offense. On defense, he was largely disappointing. That version of Porzingis, if he shows up at the playoffs, that's a problem. But outside of that, I'm not betting against Luka Doncic. And that's the nightmare matchup because um, if the teams get rearranged a bit, if the order gets reshuffled just a bit, you could have Portland in that slot.
Yeah.
And Dame Lillard's another nightmare in the playoffs.
Right.
Although, if I had to pick, if I were the Suns, or let's say the Clippers move up to second place, if I had to pick between the Mavs and the Trailblazers, I'd pick the Trailblazers because I think that's a team you can take on and beat. They've lost Gary Trent Jr. also. That's a big blow. Although now they have a three guard combo, that's going to be a nightmare to defend against. But they have no interior defense whatsoever. They don't have much squad depth outside of, well, if Norman Powell's coming off the bench, then that, and that's about it. They don't have too much squad depth. So I'd pick the Trailblazers if I had to face either the Trailblazers or the Mavs, and that's true if I'm Phoenix or if I'm the Clippers.
The Trailblazers are interesting, right? I mean, they had a great opportunity to leapfrog the Lakers into fifth
Yeah,
because the Lakers, without LeBron and AD, have sucked offensively. Now they don't seem to do that anymore because they beat the Nets, and I can see them bouncing back with a few more victories to follow that up.
They blew out the
But the
Nets.
Trailblazers really blew their chance to go up to fifth and
Yep.
probably face Denver Nuggets instead of the Clippers. But
Yep.
now the sit in sixth place. If they sit a couple of games ahead of the Mavs, so that's still unlikely that the Mavs will just go over them. But the Portland Trailblazers versus the Clippers, that could be an interesting matchup as well, especially given the history between Paul George, Dame Lillard, and the whole blow up in the bubble right after Dame Lillard missed those two free throws, and the whole Clippers bench erupted, and those
Cancun
series
on
of
three.
tweets that followed, and that's going to be a fun matchup. I don't want to see Portland Trailblazers slip to the seventh because I would love a Portland versus Clippers first round matchup. I know the Clippers start off as favorites,
Hmm.
but just the matchup is very drool worthy, I would say.
And a couple of thoughts on the Clippers. First, I think they should start most series in the West as favorites,
Hmm.
even against higher ranked teams because of the
Yep.
personnel that they have. Barring the Lakers, I don't think any other team has any business entering a series against the Clippers as favorites, despite their
Hmm.
fuck ups last season. That's one. Two, they've made just about as many enemies in the conference as possible without ever coming anywhere close to winning a championship. That's as high as you can go. Like the Golden State Warriors have haters across the league. There are people waiting to trap them and humiliate them. The Patriots in the NFL have haters, and for good reason because they won so much. The Warriors won so much. Clippers have never even gotten out of their own conference, and they have as many winners as like a serial championship winning, like a three-peat team would. It's super odd because Luca absolutely hates the Clippers. I don't know what happens to him every time he faces the Clippers. He really like he plays with vengeance. He plays well almost always, but it's almost like he's out for blood when he's playing against the Clippers. That smile goes away. He's looking to, even if it is a smile, it's a sinister one. Like I want to taste blood tonight. He just goes psychotic against the Clippers. Same's the case with Devin Booker. So Phoenix is not an easy matchup. Chris Paul, no love lost. He's going to come out wanting to remind the Clippers what they missed out on when they let him go or when he moved
Yeah,
on.
it was a fiery matchup. The Clippers versus the Suns
Yeah.
last week, where even in the first time that the two teams met, there was ejection, there were fouls, there were technical, there were flagrant. So it's going to be a fun matchup either ways. Either the Mavs or the Suns, whoever comes out and face the Clippers in the second round, that's going to be a super
who
fun matchup.
whoever faces the Clippers is going to be like a grudge match. It's the Mavs, it's Phoenix, it's Portland because Lillard doesn't have
Yeah.
any love there. If it's the Lakers, wow. Like the Clippers haven't made it really easy for themselves, have they? When they when you look at all these matchups, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Also, not to forget Devin Booker humiliated uh, the most elite two-way wing defensive duo in the league because Kawhi and Paul George were double teaming Devin Booker, and he hit the
Yep.
game-winning dagger over them in the bubble. So yeah, it's going to be a fun matchup either way. Whoever's playing the Clippers, that'll be a bomb of a series.
And the fourth matchup, which we haven't come to yet, is probably the biggest of them all. The Denver Nuggets, who, according to me at least, as of today, are the favorites in the West. And
Mhm.
the Lakers, who once AD and LeBron returns, will automatically elevate themselves to the favorites.
Yep.
That's going to be a super fun first round matchup. It was a Western Conference final the last season. Uh, how would you fancy that to go around?
Aaron Gordon, Detective Gordon, Flash Gordon. I don't give a damn. Lakers in five. It's look, it's a nice concept. I remember last season once we spoke about the Houston Rockets offense being like a concept car. It sounds great, looks great, but by the time it's manufactured and ready to drive, it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be anywhere close to what it looks like on the whiteboard. The Denver Nuggets offense is a bit like that. It's too good to be true. It remains to be seen if it stands the test of time in the limited window that they get in the playoffs. It's the same with the Brooklyn Nets, except it's slightly different because it's you have three ISO ball guards on top of a fluid offense and playmaking, all of that. So for me, the like right now, Denver has great off the ball movement, blah blah blah. They're cutting and slashing to the rim, and the passing's working great. And Jokic is an elite playmaker, all of that. Will that once people start switching to zones, once people start figuring out how best to guard against Gordon cutting to the rim, against Jamal Murray pulling up, blah blah blah, and they're not going to shut Denver down, but they're going to make it harder for Denver to get to their spots, find their guy, find the open man. When they do that, last season, you saw Jamal Murray go off. In a lot of pivotal games, it wasn't Jokic so much as Murray who just went off and took Utah out of the game and then took the Clippers out. Jokic played very well, don't get me wrong. But in those key moments, It was put the ball in Jamal Murray's hands because he's going to go ISO against their best defender and come up with some magic. Beat Donovan Mitchell, beat whoever else was guarding him on the Clippers, Pat Bev, Paul George, whoever. The why I would still have faith in the Brooklyn Nets is they have three all-time greats, each of whom can just you put the ball in their hands, they can go get a shot just about whenever in a game. Denver don't have that. Aaron Gordon's not that guy. Jokic is not
Yeah.
that guy. Jokic can find that guy, but they don't have that guy. Jamal Murray is about just about their only bet, right? So I'll see it when I believe it. You don't bet on things that have hardly ever
Hmm.
happened, if not never happened. So for that reason, I don't consider Denver the favorites. When the Lakers come back, if it's Denver against the Lakers, I have the exact same question that I had last year. Who the hell is guarding Anthony Davis? Everything else can be discussed. Who's guarding? And there's no one that can stop him. He can make life difficult for Jokic. Jokic is well and truly elite, but AD can shave a few points off of his total. I don't think Jokic can just even so much as touch AD at the other end. That's
We
the matchup that it'll boil down to.
we did speak about the depth of Denver Nuggets being a
Yeah,
problem, and it was pretty evident in that game against the Celtics, right? I mean, they were
yeah,
leading by 14 at the end of the third quarter, or with 2 minutes left in the third quarter, and Jokic checked out, and MPJ checked out, and when they returned, the Celtics were already leading by 10, and you saw that the bench
yeah.
was not good enough for
Mm,
the even the Celtics, who's been a pretty inconsistent team this season, and Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown, they torched them, and the Nuggets
yeah,
had an embarrassing loss to say the least. First loss, of course, first loss after the Gordon trade, first loss in eight. So
right.
wouldn't read too much into it, but
Yeah,
that depth, the quality of the depth is
correct.
showing there. I mean, it's in the sense it's not good enough. But coming back to the Lakers, do you think LeBron and AD will be ready? I mean, of course they'll be fit and they'll be ready to go, but that match fitness that they talk about, or that presence of match, the absence of match
Yeah.
playing time, right? Would that be a problem when you comes at least to the first round matchups?
No, not really. And we have a very recent example to validate my claim. So it's not guesswork so much as we've seen this very recently. They came off a 4 or 5 month bubble. With hardly anyone was playing basketball. Maybe they had like a private court where they were getting shots up. That's about it. And then they showed up and they looked shaky AF. Remember
Hmm.
the start of the bubble? Lakers
Yep,
looked
yep,
miserable. Like
yep.
we
I
were thinking,
picked Portland in the first round, so I remember that.
wow, okay, wow. Yeah, okay. Welcome to LeBron James in the postseason. You never bet against. Um, and all they need is like a good 8 to 10 games, not only for people to get their rhythms back, but also to figure out their rotations, have their plan B, C. Like they used that extensively last season. It took one kind of team against Portland, and they depended a lot on size because people would just bully around Nurkic and get the better of Whiteside. Then they went up against the ultra small whole square ball Houston Rockets, and then that's it. They just sat out Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee almost for the entirety of the series. And the Lakers went small, and they played AD at the five, or they played Markieff Morris at the five. So all of these little tweaks. Um, all they need is a good 10-12 run game because it's not like they've added too many new pieces outside of Drummond. Macklemore off the bench is a great addition, but uh, they've got most of this figured out. It just have a few runs of it, get back into shape. I wouldn't be too worried unless there's another injury. I wouldn't be too worried about AD and LeBron, and that's another heavy reason why one would have to believe the Lakers are outright favorites against the Nuggets, regardless of
Hmm.
current track record, regardless of whatever. Nuggets have a starting five. I'm not even convinced that starting five can take the Lakers start. Like you're talking Schroeder, KCP, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Drummond. No way. That Denver
Hmm.
team just doesn't match up. Greatest offense, nobody cares. Even without AD and LeBron, the Lakers were like sixth in the league in defense, starting
Yep.
and bench. You put those two back, especially AD back into that lineup. Oof. So
Yeah.
there's that. Then there's the backup guys. The Lakers have ridiculous depth. If they have AD and LeBron back, it's filthy how many options they have off the bench. Like Markieff Morris, they've got Montrezl Harrell off the bench, Markieff Morris off the bench, Ben McLemore now off the bench, Talon Horton Tucker off the bench, Kyle Kuzma, Alex Caruso. It just goes on and on and on. So Lakers have way too much depth. So that second unit is going to butcher Denver's
Hmm.
second. The second you take Jokic off, what do the Lakers
Yep.
do? They bring Harrell on. Because as
Yep.
long as Jokic is on the court, I don't want Harrell even on the bench. Just leave him in the locker room. 'Cause we don't need that kind of energy. But the second Jokic goes off the court, Harrell comes on. Nobody can contain him at either end, and they're done for the Nuggets. So they have a problem. They have a big problem if the Lakers come back fully fit. The league does, but
Mhm.
especially the Denver Nuggets. Any team without much depth is going to struggle heavily against the Lakers. They'll just wear them out.
It's quite a surprising and welcome change, I would say, for the Lakers compared to last season, where we spoke about how top heavy they are and they
Yeah,
didn't have the rest of the squad. It's a
correct.
nice addition, and I think I would kind of agree that the Lakers would elevate themselves to the spot, that favorite spot, if
For
LeBron
sure.
and AD are back. I mean, that's a different beast of a team to take
Hmm.
down. But that's going to be a fun matchup. Just 4 weeks left for the playoffs. Super excited. Can't wait. Even this play-in tournament and all of that, I'm
Yeah.
waiting, looking forward to that. It's gonna. It's I think it's the most exciting part of the NBA season where you're the lead up to the playoffs and the playoffs itself. I think nothing can beat that. But that's all I have for you in today's episode. I will catch you tomorrow.
Hey, cheers.